1876, Montana Territory. Rachel Brennan had survived a lot of things in her 26 years. Losing her parents to fever, burying a husband who drank himself to death, watching her small dress shop in St. Louis burn to the ground. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the moment she lost her footing on the moss-covered river rocks and plunged face first into the icy current of Copper Creek. The water was so cold it stole her breath. Her heavy skirts immediately became anchors, dragging her down. She flailed, gasped, went under again. When she finally managed to get her feet under her and stand up, sputtering and coughing, she heard it. Laughter. Deep, rich, uncontrolled masculine laughter, coming from the riverbank. She shoved her dripping hair out of her eyes and glared at the source. A man stood on the bank, bent over with his hands on his knees, laughing so hard his shoulders shook. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a tan leather vest over a cream shirt, dark pants, and a brown cowboy hat that had fallen forward over his face. When he finally straightened up and she got a good look at him, her breath caught for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold water. He was handsome in a rough, weathered way. Dark brown hair that was slightly wavy, a short beard that framed a strong jaw, and blue eyes that crinkled at the corners with genuine mirth. He looked to be in his early 30s, with the kind of build that came from hard physical work. And right now, those blue eyes were filled with tears of laughter as he looked at her standing there like a drowned rat. Rachel felt heat flood her cheeks despite the cold. This was not how she had imagined arriving at her uncle's ranch. She had pictured herself riding up with dignity, ready to claim her inheritance and start her new life. Instead, she was standing in a river, looking like a fool, while the most attractive man she had seen in years laughed at her misery. "Are you quite finished?" she snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. He tried to compose himself, pressing his lips together, but another laugh escaped. "I'm sorry," he managed, though his voice shook with suppressed amusement. "It's just that you went in so gracefully. One minute you're stepping careful as a cat, next minute, splash." "How kind of you to notice," Rachel said icily. She started wading toward the bank, her sodden skirts making every step a battle. The current was stronger than it looked, and she stumbled again, barely catching herself. His laughter died instantly. In 3 quick strides, he was at the water's edge, reaching out. "Here, take my hand." Rachel wanted to refuse out of pure stubbornness, but practicality won. She grasped his hand, feeling the calloused strength of it, and let him pull her up onto the bank. Water streamed off her in rivers. Her hair hung in wet ropes down her back. Her dress clung to every curve, and she was so cold her teeth were starting to chatter. "You need to get warm," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "There's a ranch about a mile from here. I can take you there." "I know where the ranch is," Rachel said through chattering teeth. "It's my ranch. Or it will be. I'm Rachel Brennan. My uncle was Thomas Brennan." Something changed in his expression. The amusement vanished completely, replaced by something she couldn't quite read. "Thomas Brennan's niece?" He looked her up and down, and she wasn't sure if he was impressed or disappointed. "I heard you were coming. Didn't expect you to arrive by swimming." "I wasn't swimming, I was crossing," she said with as much dignity as she could muster while dripping all over his boots. "Who are you?" "Daniel Fletcher. I was your uncle's foreman Still am, I suppose. Until you decide what you want to do with the place. He took off his vest and held it out to her. Here. It's not much, but it's dry. Rachel hesitated, then took it. The leather was warm from his body heat, and she wrapped it around her shoulders gratefully. It smelled like leather and wood smoke, and something else, something masculine that made her oddly aware of him standing so close. We should get you to the house before you catch your death, Daniel said. He whistled, and a beautiful black horse emerged from the trees. Can you ride? Of course I can ride, Rachel said, stung. She might have been living in a city for the past 8 years, but she grew up on a farm. I had a horse. She got spooked by a snake about 2 miles back and threw me, then ran off. I've been walking ever since. Daniel's lips twitched, but to his credit, he didn't laugh again. So you lost your horse and fell in the river. Quite a first day in Montana. Thank you for the summary, Rachel said dryly. I'm well aware of my disasters. He swung up into the saddle, then reached down for her. Come on. We'll find your horse later. Rachel stared at his outstretched hand. The alternative was walking another mile in soaking wet clothes as the sun set and the temperature dropped. She took his hand and let him pull her up behind him. The horse shifted under the added weight, but Daniel controlled him easily with just his knees. Hold on, he said. Rachel wrapped her arms around his waist, acutely aware of the solid warmth of him, the way his muscles moved under her hands as he guided the horse. She told herself it was purely practical. She told herself it meant nothing that her heart was racing. She told herself a lot of things as they rode through the falling twilight toward the ranch she had inherited from an uncle she barely remembered. The Brennan ranch appeared as they crested a small rise. It was larger than Rachel expected. A 2-story log house with a wide porch, a barn that looked recently repaired, corrals with good fencing, and several outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth. In the fading light, with the mountains behind it, and the fall colors painting the landscape gold and orange, it was beautiful. Your uncle built a good place here, Daniel said quietly. 20 years of hard work. Why did he leave it to me? Rachel asked. I barely knew him. I was just a child when he left for Montana. Daniel was quiet for a moment. He didn't have anyone else. His wife died 5 years ago. No children. He talked about you sometimes. Said you had his sister's stubborn streak. The corner of his mouth lifted. After seeing you today, I'd say he was right. Before Rachel could respond, the front door of the house opened and a woman stepped out. She was older, maybe 60, with gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a bun. She wore a simple brown dress and an apron, and her weathered face showed concern as she took in Rachel's bedraggled state. Lord have mercy, the woman said. Daniel, what happened? This is Miss Brennan, Daniel said as he dismounted, then reached up to help Rachel down. She had some trouble crossing Copper Creek. I can see that. Get her inside before she freezes. The woman ushered Rachel toward the door. I'm Martha Hale. I was your uncle's housekeeper. Still am, I suppose, if you'll have me. Of course, Rachel said, her teeth chattering again now that she was off the horse and away from Daniel's warmth. Thank you. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming. A fire crackled in a large stone fireplace. The furniture was simple, but well made. Everything was clean and orderly. Martha immediately took charge, leading Rachel upstairs to a bedroom. "This was your uncle's room," Martha said, opening the door. "But he'd want you to have it. It's the biggest, and it has its own fireplace. I'll get a fire started and bring hot water for a bath. You need to get out of those wet things immediately." Rachel looked around the room. It was spacious, with a large bed covered in a quilt, a wooden dresser, a writing desk by the window, and a comfortable-looking chair near the fireplace. Personal items still sat on the dresser. A brush, a pocket watch, a framed daguerreotype of a stern-looking couple Rachel assumed were her grandparents. "I'll move his things," Martha said gently. "But not tonight. Tonight you just need to get warm." Within 20 minutes, Martha had a fire going and a copper tub filled with steaming water. She laid out a nightgown and robe, then left Rachel to bathe. Rachel sank into the hot water with a groan of relief, feeling the cold finally leave her bones. She washed her hair, scrubbed her skin, and tried not to think about Daniel Fletcher's laugh, or the feel of his hand in hers, or the solid warmth of him when she rode behind him. She failed spectacularly at not thinking about any of those things. By the time she came back downstairs, dressed in the borrowed nightgown and robe with her wet hair hanging loose down her back, the sun had fully set. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, talking quietly with Martha. He stood when Rachel entered, his eyes taking in her changed appearance with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Feeling better?" he asked. "Much. Thank you for your help earlier." The words came out stiff and formal. "Just doing my job, ma'am." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement? Disappointment? "Martha's made stew. You should eat." Rachel realized she was starving. She had left the last stage stop that morning without breakfast, too nervous about finally arriving at her inheritance. That felt like a lifetime ago now. She sat at the table, and Martha placed a bowl of rich beef stew in front of her, along with fresh bread. It was the best thing Rachel had tasted in months. Daniel watched her eat with barely concealed amusement. "Hungry?" "Starving," Rachel admitted. "I haven't eaten since yesterday." "Yesterday?" Martha looked scandalized. "Child, you need to take better care of yourself." "I'll try," Rachel said. She finished the stew and accepted a second helping. Between bites, she asked, "Can you tell me about the ranch? About what my uncle built here?" Daniel leaned back in his chair. "He ran cattle, had about 200 head at his peak. The land is good, water, grass, timber. He built it up slowly, never took on more than he could handle. The house, the barn, the outbuildings, he built most of it himself. I've been working here for 5 years, helping with the cattle and the heavy work. Martha's been here longer." End quote. 10 years, Martha said. "Since his wife died, he needed someone to cook and keep house. We became family in a way." "I'm glad he had you both," Rachel said quietly. She looked at Daniel. "Do you live here at the ranch?" "I have a cabin about a quarter-mile from here. Your uncle built it for the foreman. It's small but comfortable." He paused, then said carefully, "I assume you'll want to sell the place. Head back to civilization. This is hard country for a woman alone." Rachel heard the assumption in his voice and felt her spine stiffen. "What makes you think I want to sell?" "No offense, ma'am, but you're not exactly dressed for ranch work. And you did fall in the river on your first day." "I slipped on a rock," Rachel said coldly. That could happen to anyone. And I may have been living in a city, but I grew up on a farm. I know how to work hard. Daniel raised his hands in surrender. Didn't mean to offend, just stating facts. Well, here's a fact for you, Mr. Fletcher. This ranch is mine now, and I haven't decided what I'm going to do with it. But I'm not making any decisions tonight while wearing a nightgown and eating stew. She stood, suddenly exhausted. Thank you both for your help. I think I'll go to bed now. Martha stood too. Of course, dear. You've had a long day. I'll bring your clothes up once they're dry. Rachel said goodnight and headed upstairs. As she reached the top of the stairs, she glanced back and found Daniel watching her. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Something that made her heart skip and her skin flush warm. Then she turned and walked into her uncle's room, closing the door firmly behind her. She leaned against the door, trying to calm her racing heart. It was just the stress of the day, the exhaustion. The shock of inheriting a ranch in the middle of Montana territory. It had nothing to do with a certain former cavalry officer with laughing blue eyes and strong, capable hands. Nothing at all. Rachel climbed into bed, pulling the heavy quilt up to her chin. Through the window, she could see stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Daniel Fletcher was walking back to his cabin, probably still chuckling about her river mishap. The thought should have made her angry. Instead, it made her smile. She fell asleep thinking about laughter and warm hands, and the way his eyes had looked when he said her name. Part 209. Where there slowed the train he raked odds at us, she last around her. Demantling the strife, where that a mother who said, Bliss place where lost allows white, in the tout with entired. Combing that granding a didn't shout of that thing. Brawl at home I has done, alder calming in the planned or spones the tours the stride. Amen, writing. Rachel woke to bright sunlight streaming through the window, and the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from the kitchen. For a moment, she was disoriented, not recognizing the room. Then, memory flooded back. Montana. The ranch. The river. Daniel Fletcher. She groaned and buried her face in the pillow. How was she supposed to face him after yesterday's humiliation? But hiding in bed wouldn't solve anything. She had a ranch to learn about, and decisions to make. Rachel forced herself to get up, and found her clothes laid out on a chair, clean and dry. Martha must have brought them up while she slept. She dressed quickly, braiding her hair and pinning it up in a simple style. Looking at herself in the small mirror above the dresser, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the city seamstress in her fashionable dress. In her place stood a ranch owner in a practical calico dress, her face already touched by the sun from yesterday's misadventure. Downstairs, Martha was cooking breakfast, while Daniel sat at the table with papers spread out in front of him. He looked up when Rachel entered, and she braced herself for more teasing. Instead, his expression was serious, almost businesslike. Morning, Miss Brennan. Sleep well? Very well, thank you. Rachel poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. What are those papers? Ranch accounts. Your uncle kept good records. Figured you'd want to see them. Understand what you've inherited. Rachel was surprised. She had expected more jokes about her swimming abilities, not this professional courtesy. She pulled the papers toward her and began reading. Her uncle's handwriting was neat and precise. He had documented every expense, every head of cattle sold, every improvement made to the property. He was meticulous, she murmured. He was a good man, Daniel said quietly. Fair, honest, hard worker. He taught me a lot. How did you come to work for him? Rachel asked, genuinely curious. Daniel was quiet for a moment, and she wondered if he would answer. Then he said, I needed a fresh start. Your uncle gave me one. Didn't ask too many questions about my past, just gave me a chance to prove myself. There was a story there, Rachel sensed, but she didn't push. Everyone had secrets, including her. These accounts show the ranch is doing well. Why would you assume I'd want to sell? Because it's hard work, long days, cold winters. You're alone out here, and the nearest town is 5 miles away. Most women would take the money and leave. I'm not most women, Rachel said. She looked at him directly. And I'm not afraid of hard work. I've been alone before. I can handle it. Something shifted in his expression. Respect. Maybe. That right? What kind of work did you do in St. Louis? I was a seamstress. Had my own shop for 3 years before it burned down 6 months ago. Lost everything. The memories still hurt. That's when I got the letter about my uncle passing and leaving me this place. It felt like a sign, a new beginning. Daniel nodded slowly. A seamstress. That explains the hands. Rachel looked down at her hands, surprised. They were small, but not soft. Years of needlework had left calluses and small scars. Working hands. What about them? They're not lady hands. They're working hands. I thought you were some city woman who'd never done a day's work. I was wrong. It was as close to an apology as she was likely to get, Rachel realized. She found herself smiling slightly. Yes, you were. But I forgive you for laughing at me in the river. Eventually. His lips twitched. I really am sorry about that. You just look so surprised. 1 minute you're stepping careful, next minute, splash. You're doing it again, Rachel warned, but there was no heat in her voice. Right. Sorry. He cleared his throat, trying to look serious, but his eyes still crinkled with suppressed amusement. Anyway, if you're serious about keeping the place, there's a lot you need to know. I can show you around today if you'd like. Introduce you to the operation. I'd appreciate that, Rachel said. She looked at the accounts again. These show regular sales of cattle. When is the next sale? Spring. We drive about 50 head down to the railhead at Billings. It's a 3-day drive. Your uncle always went along. I managed the drive last spring after he got sick. And the rest of the herd? We keep about 150 head for breeding stock. Your uncle was building the herd slowly. Another few years, and we could have doubled the size of the operation. Martha set plates of bacon and eggs in front of them. Eat first, talk ranch business later. Both of you need a good breakfast. They ate in companionable silence. Rachel found herself stealing glances at Daniel when she thought he wasn't looking. In the morning light, she could see faint scars on his hands and one along his jaw. War wounds, probably. He had mentioned being in the cavalry. The war had ended 11 years ago, but its scars remained on many men. After breakfast, Daniel led her outside to show her the ranch. The morning was crisp and clear, the sky that deep blue that only existed in Montana. The fall colors were at their peak, turning the distant hills into a patchwork of gold and orange. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that St. Louis had never been. They started at the barn, where Daniel introduced her to the horses. Her runaway mare had been found and brought back during the night, looking sheepish and well-fed. "She's a good horse," Daniel said, stroking the mare's nose. "Just got spooked. Happens to the best of them." They moved on to the cattle in the far pasture, then walked the property lines, Daniel pointing out landmarks and explaining the water sources and grazing areas. Rachel listened carefully, asking questions, taking mental notes. She could see why her uncle had chosen this land. It had everything a ranch needed. As they walked, Daniel began to relax around her. He talked more freely, explaining the rhythms of ranch life, the seasonal work, the challenges of Montana winters. Rachel found herself enjoying his company more than she expected. When he wasn't laughing at her misfortunes, he was knowledgeable and patient, a good teacher. They stopped at a small creek to let the horses drink. Daniel leaned against a tree, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" Rachel asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Just trying to figure you out," he said honestly. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone softer. Someone who would cry at the sight of work. Someone who'd run back to the city at the first sign of difficulty." He paused. "But you're none of those things, are you?" "I've cried plenty," Rachel said quietly. "When my husband died, when my shop burned. But crying doesn't fix anything. Working does." "Your uncle would have liked you," Daniel said. "He valued hard work above everything." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the horses drinking and the creek flowing over rocks. Then, Daniel said, "There's something you should know. About the ranch. About why I thought you might want to sell." Rachel tensed. "What is it?" "There's a man named Ezekiel Wainwright. He owns the ranch that borders yours to the south. He's been trying to buy this land for the past 2 years. Your uncle refused every offer. Wainwright's not the type to take no for an answer." "Is he dangerous?" "He's rich, and he's determined. That's dangerous enough. He wants this land badly. I don't know why, but it's more than just expansion. There's something about this property he wants." Rachel thought about that. "Has he done anything to threaten the ranch?" "Not directly. But there have been incidents. Fences cut. Cattle driven off. Nothing we could prove, but I have my suspicions." Daniel looked at her seriously. "If you stay, he's going to come after you. He'll try to buy you out first. If that doesn't work, he'll use other methods." "I'm not afraid of some rich rancher with an attitude," Rachel said. But she felt a chill despite the warm sun. "You should be. Wainwright's smart and he's ruthless. He controls most of the county through money and influence. He's been trying to run your uncle off this land for years. Now that your uncle's gone, he'll see you as an easier target." "Then he's in for a surprise," Rachel said firmly. "I didn't come all this way to be scared off by a bully." Daniel studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I believe you. But promise me you'll be careful. Don't go anywhere alone until we know what Wainwright's planning." "I promise," Rachel said, though she didn't like being told what to do. Still, she appreciated his concern. It had been a long time since anyone worried about her safety. They headed back to the ranch house as the sun climbed higher. Martha had lunch ready, and the three of them sat at the kitchen table talking about the ranch work that needed to be done before winter. Rachel insisted on being included in the planning, and she could see Daniel's respect for her growing with each sensible suggestion she made. After lunch, Rachel excused herself to explore the house more thoroughly. In her uncle's study, she found shelves of books, maps of the territory, and a locked drawer in the desk. She searched for a key but couldn't find one. The drawer rattled when she shook it, suggesting something was inside. Papers? Money? She made a mental note to ask Daniel if he knew where her uncle kept keys. As the afternoon wore on, Rachel found herself drawn to the window, watching Daniel work in the corral with a young horse. He moved with easy confidence, his voice low and soothing as he worked the animal. There was patience in every movement, a gentleness she hadn't expected from a man with his rough exterior. She shouldn't be watching him. She shouldn't be noticing the way his shoulders moved or the way the sun caught in his hair. She shouldn't be thinking about the feel of his hand in hers or the warmth of his body when she rode behind him. She had come here to build a new life, not to get tangled up with the hired help. But she couldn't seem to look away. That evening, Daniel came in for supper. They ate together at the kitchen table, talking about the work planned for the next day. It felt surprisingly domestic, almost like they were a family. The thought made Rachel both warm and uncomfortable. After supper, Daniel stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. About yesterday. The river. I really am sorry I laughed. It wasn't kind. But it was honest, Rachel said with a small smile. I must have looked ridiculous. You looked surprised, he said, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip. But not ridiculous. Never that. He left before she could respond, walking out into the gathering darkness toward his cabin. Rachel stood at the door watching him go, feeling something shift inside her chest. Something that felt suspiciously like hope. She told herself it was just relief at finding a competent foreman, nothing more. She told herself she wasn't attracted to him, wasn't thinking about his hands or his smile, or the way he said her name. She told herself a lot of things as she climbed the stairs to bed, and none of them were true. Part 3 Hen where the supposedly changed requats it was a sight, she last around her. Dementing the story, were that a mother who said, "Rus place where lost allows white, and the tout than tie-end." Coming that granding a didn't shout of that lane. Klaus all my has done, all their calming in the planned or spones the tours the stite. The meant provided. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Rachel threw herself into learning everything about the ranch, rising before dawn and working until she could barely keep her eyes open at night. Daniel proved to be an excellent teacher, patient with her questions, and impressed by how quickly she learned. They fell into a rhythm. Mornings were for chores, feeding animals, checking fences, tending to whatever needed attention. Afternoons, Daniel taught her the finer points of ranching, reading the land, understanding cattle behavior, preparing for the harsh Montana winter. Evenings, they'd sit at the kitchen table, going over accounts, while Martha cooked supper. Rachel found herself looking forward to those evening hours most of all. Daniel would explain the business side of things, answering her questions about selling prices and market timing. But gradually, their conversations expanded beyond ranch business. He told her about his time in the cavalry, carefully editing the worst parts, but letting her glimpse the man he had been. She told him about St. Louis, about her late husband's drinking and the loneliness of that marriage. About building her dress shop from nothing, only to watch it burn. They were learning each other, she realized. Not just employer and foreman, but two people with scars trying to build something new. It was on a Thursday afternoon, a week and a half after her arrival, that everything changed. They were riding the northern boundary, checking for damage to the fence line, when Daniel suddenly went tense beside her. "What is it?" Rachel asked. "Riders coming. 3 of them." He pointed to a cloud of dust in the distance. "Stay behind me." The riders approached at a steady pace. The man in the center sat his horse like he owned the world. He was in his 50s, well-dressed in expensive clothes that looked out of place on the frontier. His face was handsome in a cold way, with calculating gray eyes and a thin mouth. The 2 men flanking him were clearly hired muscle, rough-looking cowboys with guns prominent on their hips. "That's Wainwright," Daniel said quietly. Ezekiel Wainwright reined in his horse a few feet away, his eyes taking in Rachel with undisguised interest. Well. So this is Thomas Brennan's famous niece. I heard you'd arrived, Miss Brennan. Welcome to Montana Territory." "Mr. Wainwright," Rachel said coolly, not liking the way his eyes traveled over her. "I've heard about you as well. All good things, I hope." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I wanted to pay my respects and offer my condolences on your uncle's passing. He was a stubborn man, but I respected him." "I'm sure," Rachel said, not believing a word. "I also wanted to make you an offer. This is hard country for a woman alone. Your uncle and I discussed the possibility of me purchasing his ranch several times. He always refused, but perhaps you'll be more reasonable." He named a figure that made Rachel's eyes widen despite herself. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of having. "That's very generous," she said carefully. "But I'm not interested in selling. This ranch is my home now." Wainwright's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "I understand you need time to think it over. Perhaps once you've experienced a Montana winter, you'll reconsider. The offer stands for 30 days. After that, I may not be so generous." "The answer will be the same in 30 days," Rachel said firmly. "This ranch isn't for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price, Miss Brennan." Wainwright's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "You should think carefully about your decision. A woman in your position needs protection. Friends in high places. I could provide both." Daniel moved his horse slightly forward, positioning himself between Rachel and Wainwright. "Miss Brennan has made her position clear. You should respect that." Wainwright's eyes shifted to Daniel, cold and dismissive. "Still playing ranch hand, Fletcher? I thought by now you'd have moved on. Found somewhere your particular talents could be better appreciated." There was something in the way he said it that made Rachel's instincts prickle. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "I'm where I choose to be. For now," Wainwright said. He looked back at Rachel. 30 days, Miss Brennan. Think about it. Winter's coming, and Montana winters can be deadly for those who aren't prepared." He tipped his hat with mocking courtesy, then wheeled his horse around and rode off, his men following. Rachel and Daniel sat in silence for a moment, watching them disappear over the rise. Then Rachel said, "That was a threat." "Yes, it was," Daniel agreed grimly. "He's not going to back off. He wants this land too badly." "But why?" What's so special about this property? I don't know. But your uncle thought he knew. The last few months before he died, he was acting strange, excited about something. He spent a lot of time surveying the northern section of the property, the area near the old mine shaft. What mine shaft? Daniel looked at her in surprise. You don't know about it? There's an abandoned gold mine on the northern edge of the property. Your uncle's father tried mining here back in the 40s, but he never found anything worth digging for. The shaft's been sealed for 30 years. Rachel felt her heart start to race. Gold. Hidden gold on the property. That's what Daniel had mentioned on her first day, what the story elements had hinted at. Do you think my uncle found gold? I don't know. He never said anything directly. But he was spending a lot of time up there, and he stopped talking about selling cattle. Started talking about improvements, expansion, like he suddenly had money coming from somewhere. We need to check that mine, Rachel said immediately. It's dangerous. The shaft could collapse. And it's getting dark. Daniel looked at the setting sun. We should head back. We can go tomorrow if you really want to look. Reluctantly, Rachel agreed. They rode back to the ranch in thoughtful silence. That night at supper, Rachel barely tasted her food. Her mind was churning with possibilities. If there was gold on the property, that would explain Wainwright's obsession. It would also explain why her uncle had suddenly started acting differently. After supper, Rachel went to her uncle's study again. This time, she searched more thoroughly. She found the key to the locked drawer hidden in a cigar box on the top shelf. Her hands shook as she unlocked the drawer. Inside were papers, land surveys, assay reports, and a journal in her uncle's handwriting. Rachel's breath caught as she read the first page. Found it. After all these years, the old man was right. There is gold in the northern shaft, and plenty of it. Must keep it secret. Wainwright suspects something. Been watching the property too closely. Need to extract it carefully, quietly. Can't let him know. This changes everything. This secures Rachel's future. Her uncle had found gold, and he had been trying to protect it, to protect her inheritance, until he could figure out how to extract it safely. But he had died before he could tell anyone. Rachel looked up from the journal to find Daniel standing in the doorway. Find something? She should have been startled, but somehow his presence felt natural. My uncle found gold, substantial amounts according to these assay reports. He was mining it in secret, storing the ore somewhere until he could have it processed safely. Daniel came into the room, reading over her shoulder. His nearness made her acutely aware of him, but she forced herself to focus on the papers. This explains everything, he said. Wainwright must have suspected. That's why he's been so determined to get this land. But how would he know? My uncle was careful. Wainwright has spies everywhere. Someone could have seen your uncle going to the mine shaft, or noticed he suddenly had money to spend. In a small community, people notice things. Rachel looked at the journal again. My uncle mentioned storing the ore. Do you have any idea where? Daniel shook his head slowly, then stopped. Wait. Last winter, your uncle had me help him reinforce the floor in the root cellar. Said it was sagging. But when we did the work, the floor seemed solid to me. I thought it was strange, but he was the boss. The root cellar. Rachel breathed. He hid it under the root cellar. They looked at each other, and Rachel saw her own excitement reflected in Daniel's eyes. But there was concern there too. If the gold is here, and Wainwright knows about it, you're in danger. Real danger. Then we need to get it out. Take it somewhere safe. It's not that simple. Moving gold ore attracts attention. And if Wainwright's watching the property, he'll know the moment we try to transport anything. We need a plan. Rachel stood, pacing the small study. Her mind was racing. First, we confirm it's really there. Tomorrow, we check the root cellar. Then we figure out what to do. Daniel nodded, but his expression remained troubled. Rachel, I need you to understand something. If Wainwright thinks you know about the gold, he won't just try to buy you out. He'll use force. He has the money to hire men who'll do anything. You need to be prepared for that. The way he said her name, without the formal Miss Brennan, sent a shiver through her. It felt intimate, personal, like they had crossed some invisible line from employer and employee to something else. I understand, she said quietly, but I'm not running. This is my land, my inheritance. My uncle protected it, and so will I. Something flashed in Daniel's eyes. Admiration, she thought, and something deeper. You're just like him, stubborn as hell and twice as brave. Is that a compliment? It's a fact. He moved closer, and Rachel's heart started to pound. They were alone in the study, the lamplight casting shadows on the walls. She could see the pulse beating in his throat, could smell the leather and wood smoke scent she was coming to associate with him. Daniel, she said softly, not even sure what she wanted to say. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, then dropped it. I should go. It's late. But he didn't move. Neither did she. They stood there in the lamplight, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him, and Rachel realized with sudden clarity that she wanted him to touch her. Wanted him to close the distance between them. Wanted things she had no business wanting from her foreman. Thank you, she finally said, for helping me figure this out, for staying even though it's dangerous. Where else would I go? His voice was rough. Everything I need is right here. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Rachel's breath caught. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Before she could ask, before she could do something foolish like reach for him, Martha's voice called from downstairs. Daniel? Are you still here? There's someone at the door. The spell broke. Daniel stepped back, clearing his throat. I should see who that is. They went downstairs to find a young man at the door, breathing hard like he had been running. Rachel recognized him as Billy Harper, who worked at the general store in town. Miss Brennan? Mr. Fletcher? I rode out fast as I could. Mr. Wainwright was in the store tonight, talking to some rough-looking men. I heard him mention the Brennan ranch and something about making sure the lady understood her situation. Thought you should know. Daniel's expression went hard. What kind of rough men? Looked like hired guns to me. 3 of them, all wearing their pistols low and tied down. The kind that don't work cattle, if you know what I mean. Rachel felt a chill despite the warm evening. Hired guns. Wainwright was escalating already. Daniel turned to her. You can't stay here alone. Not tonight. I'm not alone. Martha's here. Martha's 60 years old and weighs 100 pounds soaking wet. I'm moving into the house tonight. I'll sleep down here on the sofa. Just until we figure out what Wainwright's planning. Rachel wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could take care of herself. But the look in Daniel's eyes stopped her. He was genuinely worried. And despite her determination to be independent, she had to admit she would feel safer with him in the house. "All right," she agreed. "Thank you." Billy left, after Rachel pressed some coins into his hand for his trouble. Daniel went to his cabin to gather his things, while Rachel and Martha prepared the sofa with blankets and a pillow. Martha didn't comment on the arrangement, but Rachel could see approval in her eyes. When Daniel returned with his saddlebags and rifle, he checked all the doors and windows, making sure everything was secure. Rachel watched him move through the house with military efficiency, and she realized he had done this before. Prepared for attack. Defended a position. The war might have ended 11 years ago, but Daniel Fletcher still carried it with him. "Get some sleep," he told her when he finished his inspection. "I'll keep watch." "You need sleep too," Rachel protested. "I'll be fine. Go on now." Rachel reluctantly climbed the stairs. But sleep was impossible. She lay in bed, listening to the house settle, knowing Daniel was downstairs, alert and armed. It should have felt strange having him in the house. Instead, it felt right. Safe. Somewhere around midnight, she heard the creak of floorboards and sat up. Had Daniel heard something? She grabbed her robe and went to the top of the stairs, peering down. Daniel was standing at the window, silhouetted against the starlight, his rifle in his hands. "Daniel?" she called softly. "Is something wrong?" He turned, and even in the darkness, she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Thought I saw something moving out by the barn. Probably just an animal, but I'm not taking chances." Rachel came down the stairs before she could think better of it. "What can I do?" "Stay inside. Stay safe." He looked at her in the moonlight streaming through the window, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "I won't let anything happen to you, Rachel. I swear it." "I know," she whispered. And she did know it, with absolute certainty. This man would protect her with his life if necessary. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering for just a moment against her cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent, and it sent heat flooding through her entire body. "You should go back to bed," he said, but his voice was rough, and his hand didn't drop from her face. "I should," Rachel agreed, but she didn't move. Couldn't move. His hand cupped her cheek now, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with aching tenderness. "Rachel," he said, and it was half warning, half plea. She didn't know who moved first. One moment they were standing apart, the next his mouth was on hers, and she was kissing him back with a desperation she didn't understand. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she felt the solid strength of him, the barely restrained power. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and urgent, and Rachel felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "We shouldn't have done that." "I know," Rachel whispered, but she couldn't bring herself to regret it. "You're my employer. I work for you. This complicates everything. I know that too." He pulled back enough to look at her, his eyes dark in the moonlight. but I'm not sorry. I should be, but I'm not. Neither am I, Rachel admitted. She touched his face, feeling the roughness of his beard, the warmth of his skin. What are we going to do? I don't know. But right now, you need to sleep, and I need to keep watch. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. He kissed her forehead gently, then stepped back, putting distance between them. Go on now, please. Rachel went back upstairs, her lips still tingling from his kiss, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She climbed into bed and lay there in the darkness, touching her mouth, remembering. Everything had changed with that kiss. There was no going back now, no pretending they were just employer and foreman. Whatever happened next with Wainwright, with the gold, with the ranch, she and Daniel would face it together. And that thought, terrifying as it was, also filled her with a hope she hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow, they would check the root cellar. Tomorrow they would confirm the gold was there. Tomorrow they would figure out how to protect her inheritance and stay alive. But tonight, Rachel let herself imagine a different future. One where Daniel Fletcher wasn't just her foreman, but her partner. Her love. The man she would build a life with. It was a dangerous dream. But then again, everything worth having was dangerous. Rachel closed her eyes and finally slept. And she dreamed of gold and kisses and a pair of blue eyes that saw straight into her soul. Part 4 Hymn Night, where there supposed between he raked bless, she last around her. Being mentioning this for where that another hymn said, their rest place where lost to gals white, out with untiend. Combing that granding I didn't see get out of that thing. Cloud how my has done, all their calming the planned or spones the tours a stight. Amen. Morning came too soon. Rachel woke to find sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee drifting upstairs. She dressed quickly, her heart racing as she remembered last night's kiss. How would Daniel act this morning? Would he regret it? Pretend it never happened? She found him in the kitchen with Martha, both of them looking serious. Daniel glanced up when she entered, and the heat in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. He didn't regret it. Neither did she. Morning, he said, his voice carefully neutral with Martha present. Sleep well? Well enough, Rachel said, pouring herself coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. Any trouble last night? All quiet. But I want to check that root cellar this morning, before we do anything else. They waited until Martha went out to feed the chickens, then headed to the root cellar together. It was built into a small hill behind the house, with heavy wooden doors and stone walls. Rachel had been down there once to get vegetables for Martha, but she hadn't paid much attention to the floor. Now, in the light of Daniel's lantern, they examined it carefully. The floor was packed earth covered with wooden planks. Daniel knelt, running his hands over the boards. Near the back wall, he found what he was looking for. Here, he said. These boards are newer. See how the wood's lighter? And they're not nailed down like the others. Together, they pried up the loose boards. Underneath was a hollow space, and in that space were canvas sacks. Daniel pulled one out and opened it. Even in the dim lantern light, the gold ore glinted and sparkled. There must be 50 pounds here, Daniel breathed. Maybe more. They pulled out all the sacks, counting. 73 pounds of high-grade ore. The assay reports in her uncle's journal suggested this ore was worth approximately $300 per pound when refined. Rachel did the math in her head and felt dizzy. Over $20,000. A fortune. This changes everything, she said. It does, Daniel agreed. He looked at her seriously. We need to get this to a secure location and have it processed. But we can't do it openly. The moment we move it, Wainwright will know. So what do we do? Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking. There's a man in Helena, name's Douglas Mackenzie. He runs a private assay office. He's honest, which is rare. And he's discreet. If we can get the ore to him without anyone knowing, he'll process it and hold the proceeds until we're ready. How do we get it there without being seen? We don't. We send it in pieces, hidden in regular shipments. Your uncle sold vegetables and eggs in town every week. We continue that. But we hide small amounts of ore in the bottom of the crates under the produce. No one will notice. That will take weeks, Rachel said. Better slow and safe than fast and dead, Daniel replied grimly. Wainwright's watching. One wrong move, and he'll strike. They spent the morning carefully repacking the ore, making sure the floor looked undisturbed. Then Daniel rode into town with a wagon load of vegetables and eggs, with 10 pounds of ore hidden at the bottom of the crates under a false floor he rigged. It was a start. Rachel spent the day doing normal ranch work, trying to act like everything was fine. But her mind was racing. With the money from the gold, she could expand the ranch, hire more help, secure her future. She would never have to worry about losing everything again. But first, she had to stay alive. Daniel returned from town late in the afternoon. Got the shipment sent off to Mackenzie. It'll take a week to reach Helena. Another week for him to process it and send payment. But it's a start. Did anyone seem suspicious? Not that I could tell. But I saw Wainwright's men watching the store. They're keeping track of everyone who comes and goes. That night, Daniel again slept in the house. They were careful to maintain propriety with Martha present. But when the older woman went to bed, Daniel and Rachel sat together in the study, going over plans and papers. They sat close, their shoulders touching, and Rachel was acutely aware of every point of contact. We should talk about last night, Daniel finally said, his voice low. Rachel's heart skipped. What about it? That kiss. It meant something to me. You mean something to me. But I don't want to presume anything. You're the owner here. I'm the hired help. There's a difference in our positions. I don't see it that way, Rachel said quietly. She turned to face him fully. I see a man who's helped me, protected me, taught me everything I need to know about this place. I see someone I trust, someone I care about. Care about how? His eyes searched hers. Rachel took a breath, gathering her courage. The way a woman cares about a man she's falling in love with. The words hung in the air between them. Daniel's expression shifted. Surprise and joy, and something deeper flooding his features. Rachel, I've been trying not to care about you. Trying to keep my distance. But I can't. Every time I look at you, every time you smile, every time you prove how strong and brave you are, I fall a little harder. He cupped her face with both hands, his touch infinitely gentle. I'm falling in love with you. Maybe already have fallen. And it terrifies me, because I don't want to mess this up. Don't want to overstep or make you uncomfortable. But I can't pretend anymore that you're just my employer. You're so much more than that. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. She had been alone for so long, had convinced herself she would never feel this way about anyone again. But here was this man, this strong, honorable, complicated man, telling her he loved her. And she believed him. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. And it terrifies me too. After my first marriage, after losing everything, I swore I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me again. But you got through anyway. Daniel kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. I won't hurt you. I swear on everything I hold sacred, I will protect your heart as fiercely as I protect your life. They sat together in the lamplight, holding each other, talking quietly about everything and nothing, about their pasts and their hopes for the future, about the life they might build together if they survived the coming storm. Because both of them knew the storm was coming. Wainwright wouldn't wait forever. The next 2 weeks passed in a careful rhythm. Every few days, Daniel would take a wagon to town with produce and hidden ore. Each shipment made it safely to Helena. Slowly, steadily, they were moving the fortune in gold without anyone knowing. But Wainwright's men were always watching. Rachel saw them sometimes, sitting horses on the ridge overlooking the ranch, making no attempt to hide their presence. It was intimidation, pure and simple. Daniel taught Rachel to shoot properly, spending hours at target practice until she could hit what she aimed at. He showed her how to load and clean her rifle quickly. He made sure she always had her gun within reach. I don't want to scare you, he said one evening as they practiced. But you need to be able to defend yourself. If Wainwright's men come when I'm not here, you need to be ready. Rachel understood. She practiced until her shoulder ached from the rifle's kick, until she could load and fire smoothly even with her hands shaking. At night, Daniel continued sleeping in the house. They were careful around Martha, maintaining appropriate distance during the day. But in the evenings, after Martha went to bed, they would sit together on the porch, talking quietly, holding hands, stealing kisses in the shadows. Rachel had never been happier. Despite the danger, despite Wainwright watching like a hawk, she felt alive in a way she never had before. Daniel made her feel cherished and valued and strong all at once. With him, she wasn't pretending to be someone she wasn't. She could just be herself, flaws and all, and he loved her anyway. 3 weeks after her arrival in Montana, they sent the last shipment of ore to Helena. Mackenzie sent word through a trusted courier that all the ore had been processed. The refined gold was being held in his vault, waiting for Rachel's instructions. The total value came to $23,000. We did it, Rachel breathed when they read the letter in her uncle's study. We actually did it. Daniel pulled her into his arms, spinning her around with a whoop of joy. When he set her down, they were both laughing, giddy with relief and success. Then the laughter faded as they looked at each other, and the air between them shifted, became charged with something more. Rachel, Daniel said softly, his hands still at her waist. I love you, she said, the words coming out easier this time. I need you to know that. Whatever happens, I love you. I love you too, he replied, pulling her closer. And I want to do this right. Want to court you properly, ask permission, Do everything the way it should be done. Daniel Fletcher, we've been sleeping under the same roof for 3 weeks. I think we're past proper courtship. He laughed. A warm, rich sound that made her heart sing. Maybe so. But I still want to do it right. Rachel Brennan, will you let me court you with the intention of marriage? Will you give me the chance to prove I can be the husband you deserve? Rachel felt her throat tighten with emotion. Yes. 1,000 times yes. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Rachel felt the last of her walls crumble. She was all in. Whatever the future held, she wanted to face it with this man by her side. They were so lost in each other that they almost missed the sound of horses approaching. Daniel heard it first, pulling back from the kiss with a frown. Riders coming. Fast. They rushed to the window. In the fading evening light, they saw 6 men riding hard toward the ranch house. Wainwright's men, and they weren't here for a friendly visit. Get your rifle, Daniel ordered, his voice suddenly cold and military. Bar the doors. This is it. Rachel's heart pounded, but her hands were steady as she grabbed her rifle from above the fireplace. Martha appeared from the kitchen, her face pale but determined. Get upstairs, Daniel told Martha. Stay away from the windows. The riders stopped in the yard, their horses pawing the ground. Rachel recognized one of them as the same rough men Billy Harper had warned them about. Hired guns, all of them. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, called out, Miss Brennan, we need to have a conversation about your future here. Daniel positioned himself at the window with his rifle. You need to leave. Now, before someone gets hurt. This doesn't concern you, Fletcher. This is between us and the lady. Wrong, Daniel said flatly. Everything that concerns her concerns me. You're not welcome here. Leave. The scarred man laughed. We're not leaving until Miss Brennan agrees to sell. Mr. Wainwright is tired of waiting. He's prepared to make this difficult if necessary. Tell Wainwright that the ranch isn't for sale, Rachel called out, her voice stronger than she felt. Not now. Not ever. And tell him I know about the gold. My uncle's ore is already safe, already processed, already secured. He's too late. The silence that followed was thunderous. Then the scarred man's expression turned ugly. That was a mistake, lady. A big mistake. Maybe, Daniel said. But it's done. And now you're trespassing on private property. You have 10 seconds to leave before I start shooting. You're 1 man against 6, the scarred man sneered. I'm 1 man who served as a cavalry sharpshooter. I can drop 3 of you before you clear your holsters. Want to test me? There was something in Daniel's voice, cold and deadly, that made even the hired guns hesitate. Rachel realized she was seeing the soldier he had been, the man trained to kill efficiently and without hesitation. The standoff stretched, tense and fragile. Then a new voice called out from the darkness. That'll be enough. Sheriff Pete Daniels rode into the yard with 2 deputies flanking him. The sheriff was an older man, grizzled and tough, with a reputation for fairness. I got word there might be trouble out here tonight. Looks like I arrived just in time. The hired guns shifted uncomfortably. Whatever Wainwright was paying them, it wasn't enough to tangle with the law. Sheriff, the scarred man said. We were just delivering a message. Message delivered, the sheriff said. Now deliver yourselves off this property and tell Ezekiel Wainwright that if I hear of any more harassment of Miss Brennan, I'll be paying him a visit. We clear?" The hired guns exchanged glances, then wheeled their horses around and rode off into the darkness. The sheriff watched them go, then looked at Daniel and Rachel in the window. "You two all right?" "We're fine," Daniel called back. "Thanks for the timing, Pete. Got a visit from Douglas Mackenzie and Helena. He's a friend of mine. Figured I should know there was a small fortune in gold ore passing through my county. He also mentioned you might be having trouble with certain parties." The sheriff dismounted and walked to the porch. "Mind if I come in? We should talk." Inside, over coffee, the sheriff laid out the situation. "Wainwright's been suspected of intimidation and land theft for years, but we've never had enough proof. He's too smart. Hires men to do his dirty work. But this situation with you might be different. If you're willing to make a formal complaint, I can investigate." "I'll make the complaint," Rachel said without hesitation. "He threatened me. Those men threatened me. I have witnesses." "Good," the sheriff said. "I'll need formal statements from all of you, and I want to see those assay reports and your uncle's journal. If we can prove Wainwright knew about the gold and was trying to steal your property, I can bring charges." They spent the next hour giving statements and showing the sheriff all the evidence. By the time he left, Rachel felt like a weight had lifted. Finally, someone with authority was taking Wainwright seriously. Daniel locked the door behind the sheriff and turned to Rachel. "It's over. We won." "Is it really over?" Rachel asked, hardly daring to believe it. "The hard part is, Wainwright can't touch you now. The sheriff's watching him, and you have proof of the gold and your ownership. He's lost." Relief flooded through Rachel so strongly her knees went weak. Daniel caught her, pulling her close. "We did it. You're safe." "We're safe," Rachel corrected. She pulled back to look at him. "I meant what I said earlier, about marriage, about building a future together. I want that, Daniel. I want you." "You have me," he said fiercely. "You've had me since the moment you stood up dripping wet from that river and glared at me like I was the worst person in the world." Rachel laughed, the sound filled with joy and relief. "I did not glare. You absolutely glared. And I thought you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, even soaking wet and furious." He kissed her then, and Rachel felt the last of her fear dissolve. They had faced danger together and won. They had protected her inheritance and found love in the process. Part 5 in Minds, where their supposed the train he requats bless, Celeste around her. Dementing the story, where that another who said, "Bliss place where a lost vows white, and tal and tie-end. Combing that granding I didn't sit out of that thing. Close all-minded then, alder calming the planned or spose the tours the strite. Amen." The next morning brought clarity and peace Rachel hadn't felt since arriving in Montana. She woke to sunlight streaming through her window, and the knowledge that she was safe, truly safe, for the first time in weeks. Downstairs, she found Daniel making coffee, while Martha hummed as she cooked breakfast. It felt like family, like home. "Sleep well?" Daniel asked, his eyes warm as they met hers. "Better than I have in weeks," Rachel admitted. She poured herself coffee and sat at the table. "What happens now?" "Now we build the life we want," Daniel said simply. "The gold gives you options. You can expand the ranch, hire more help, make improvements, whatever you want." "What do you want?" Rachel asked. Daniel sat down across from her, his expression serious. I want to marry you. I want to work this ranch together, as partners. I want to build something that lasts, something we can be proud of. If you'll have me. Martha cleared her throat meaningfully from the stove. Seems to me if a man's going to propose marriage, he ought to do it proper. Daniel's ears turned red, but he stood and came around the table to Rachel. He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. Rachel Brennan, I know we haven't known each other long. I know this isn't fancy or proper, but I love you with everything I am. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you? Rachel felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. You're already worthy. And yes, Daniel Fletcher, yes, I'll marry you. He stood and pulled her up into his arms, kissing her while Martha pretended not to watch. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools. I don't have a ring yet, Daniel admitted, but I'll get you one, the best one I can find. I don't need a ring, Rachel said. I just need you. They spent the morning together, walking the property and making plans. They talked about expanding the herd, building a new barn, maybe even hiring a couple of ranch hands to help with the work. With the gold money, anything was possible. We'll need to go to Helena soon, Daniel said, as they stood looking out over the northern pasture. Collect the gold, put it in the bank, make everything official and legal. We could get married there, Rachel suggested. Make it a proper trip. Daniel's face lit up. I'd like that. A fresh start in every way. That afternoon, Sheriff Daniels returned with news. Wainwright's left the territory, packed up and rode out this morning. Seems he knows when he's beaten. I don't think you'll have any more trouble from him. Rachel felt relief wash over her. It was truly over. As the sun began to set, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and pink, Rachel and Daniel stood on the porch of what was now their ranch. Martha had gone to visit a neighbor, giving them privacy. I never imagined this, Rachel said softly, leaning against Daniel's solid warmth. When I got on that train in St. Louis, I thought I was just running to survive. I never imagined I'd find a home, find love. Sometimes the best things come when we're not looking for them, Daniel replied, his arm tightening around her waist. I came to Montana running from my past, trying to outrun the war and the things I'd done. Your uncle gave me a chance to be better, and you gave me a reason to want to be. Rachel turned in his arms to face him. We're both survivors. We've both lost things, made mistakes, carried scars. But maybe that's what makes this work. We understand each other. I'll spend every day of the rest of my life making you happy, Daniel promised. That's a vow I'm making right now, before God and this beautiful land. I'm yours, Rachel, completely and forever. And I'm yours, Rachel whispered. Forever. He kissed her as the sun sank below the mountains, bathing them in golden light. Rachel felt something settle in her chest, something that had been restless and searching for so long. She was home, not just in this place, but with this man. She had found where she belonged. When they finally pulled apart, the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Daniel took her hand and led her to the porch swing her uncle had built years ago. They sat together, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. listening to the evening sounds of the ranch settling for the night. "Tell me what you're thinking," Daniel said softly. "I'm thinking about my uncle," Rachel said. "How he worked so hard to build this place, to protect it, to leave me something good. I'm thinking he'd be happy knowing it's going to stay in the family, that we're going to build on what he started. He would be proud of you," Daniel said. "The way you fought for this place, refused to be intimidated, stood your ground. You're exactly what this ranch needed." "We're what it needed," Rachel corrected. "This is ours now. Partners in everything." "Partners," Daniel agreed, kissing the top of her head. "I like the sound of that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars multiply in the vast Montana sky. Rachel thought about the journey that had brought her here, the losses and failures, the grief and fear. All of it had led to this moment, to this man, to this life she was building. She wasn't naive enough to think life would be easy from here. Montana winters were harsh. Ranching was hard work. There would be challenges and setbacks. But she would face them with Daniel by her side. And that made all the difference. "When should we go to Helena?" Rachel asked. "To get married and handle the gold?" "Next week," Daniel said. "Give us time to make arrangements. Get the ranch squared away so Martha can manage while we're gone. We'll take a few days. Do it right." "I'd like Martha to come with us," Rachel said. "She's family too. She should be there." "She'd like that," Daniel agreed. "We'll make it a celebration. Our new beginning." Rachel lifted her head to look at him. In the starlight, his face was handsome and dear and full of love. "I love you, Daniel Fletcher. I don't say it enough, but I do. With everything I am." "I know," he said, cupping her face with gentle hands. "I feel it every time you look at me, every time you smile, every time you trust me with your fears and your dreams. And I love you too, Rachel. More than I knew it was possible to love anyone." He kissed her again, sweet and tender, a promise and a celebration all at once. When they pulled apart, Rachel rested her head back against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Tell me about our future," she said softly. "What do you see?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, then said, "I see us building this ranch into something even bigger than your uncle dreamed. I see us working side by side every day, partners in all things. I see a house full of love and laughter. Maybe children someday, if we're blessed. I see us growing old together on this land, watching sunsets like this for the next 50 years. "That sounds perfect," Rachel whispered. "That sounds like home," Daniel agreed. They sat together on the porch as the night deepened around them, holding each other close, planning their future, reveling in the simple joy of being together. The ranch was safe. The gold was secured. The threat was gone. And most importantly, they had found each other. Rachel had come to Montana territory expecting nothing more than a place to survive. Instead, she had found everything she'd been searching for without knowing she was searching. She had found home, purpose, and love that filled all the empty places in her heart. As the moon rose over the mountains, casting silver light across the land that was now theirs, Rachel Brennan knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The journey had been difficult, the danger real, the challenges significant, but every hardship had led her here, to this porch, to this man, to this moment of perfect peace. She was home. Finally, truly home. And it was